So this is section 3, Hitler's rise to Fuhrer, 1933 to 1934. This is a really good section to revise because it's a very common topic area for examiners to talk about. They might talk about each of these events that you can see in front of you, and they might want you to talk about them as a small answer, so a 6 mark or maybe an 8 mark question, but very often they like to put them all together and ask a longer question, i.e. the 16 marker. And it would be a nice one to get because there's a nice simple way of remembering it, and of linking all these things together, which is what gets you the higher marks. There are cartoons that link to some of these events, which kind of makes it more memorable. Any ideas about this one? Well, if you're not sure, it's Hitler getting rid of people within his own party. That is the Night of the Long Knives. And here, of course, you've got Hitler in all his glory as Fuhrer. This is the point when Hitler has got complete control over Germany. So, in terms of learning dates, 1933 and 1934 are dates that you should be prepared to recognise in a question, because once you see those dates, you should be able to then think of all of these events that go with it. If that seems too complicated, it can be simplified even further. This is the way that you simplify 1933 to 1934. Just like we've done with other things, you need to just distill it down to the smallest amount of information, and then you should be able to trigger other things. So in this case, we've just got a sentence which is, rigged German election leads to Nazi psycho Fuhrer. And basically, this sentence stands, each of the words, stands for an event between 1933 and 1934. And this is called a mnemonic, when you have a sentence of which the first letter of each word stands for something else. It's a good one in the sense that this sentence actually makes sense, and it's actually to do with the topic and kind of sums up what's happened, because a rigged German election, well, what happened here was the SA stood outside and made sure people voted for the Nazis, leads to Nazi psycho Fuhrer, because without this German election, the Enabling Act wouldn't have been passed, which which helped Hitler become Fuhrer, because he was able to get rid of his opposition. Anyway, so we're just going to briefly go through each one to remind you what they are. So, rigged German election leads to Nazi psycho Fuhrer. Keep saying it over and over again to yourself. Okay, event number 1, the Reichstag fire. This one, well, obviously we'll go through each one in detail, but this one is the opportunity that presents itself, maybe too conveniently. The next one is the general election. This was always due to take place. The Reichstag fire happens the week before. Very convenient. In the general election, the Nazis do pretty well. In fact, their best ever yet. And this leads to them being able to pass the Enabling Act, because they can now get a majority in the Reichstag. The Enabling Act is really important because that leads to the next event, such as the Nazis taking over local government. The Enabling Act allows the Nazis to start doing things which allow them to remove their opposition. So local government could be potential opposition. Trade unions are also removed. They could be potential opposition. And then you end up with an event that comes through which is also justified by the Enabling Act. This is when Hitler tries to remove the opposition from within his own party, the Night of the Long Knives. And that was the cartoon you saw on the previous slide, where he's basically purging his own side and making sure that everybody is totally loyal to him. And then the last event is political parties are banned. And again, this is the Enabling Act put to use again. Hitler is getting rid of all opposition. At the end, the death of President Hindenburg totally solidifies everything, because essentially all of those yellow events have allowed Hitler to consolidate his power. And all he needs to do is just wait for poor President Hindenburg, who by this time is about 84, so he's getting on, to simply just pass away, and then he can just assume power. The magic touch is when he gets the army oath of loyalty to Hitler, and this means that Hitler has now got control of the army, and the reason why they do this is because the Night of the Long Knives sort of allows them to feel confident that Hitler is on their side. And of course all of this leads to Der Führer. This is Hitler combining the positions of Chancellor and President, making a new one, which is actually the ultimate power, a dictator. So we're going to go through each one in turn. the thing on the side, on the right hand side, is that mnemonic again, and when it's red it will show you which one we're on. So rigged at the moment, remember, stands for the Reichstag fire. So the Reichstag fire was a perfect opportunity, and as you can see in this picture, this is the Reichstag itself. It's in Berlin. It's like the Houses of Parliament, so think Big Ben. It's on fire. It gets burnt down. This is really awful. This is basically treason, because you are essentially destroying the seat of government. You know, it's not the Queen who's in charge at the moment, it's the Reichstag, it's the Weimar government, and this is where they are based. This is all too convenient because it happens the week before the general election is about to start. What's the link between this and the general election? Well, it will become clear very soon. So the Reichstag fire. It happens on the 27th of February 1933. It starts around 9 p.m, so it's in the evening. This man you can see appearing here, I say man, but actually he was a boy, Marius van der Lubbe. He was the Dutch communist who was found with matches on the scene. So this boy, conveniently, a communist, which is, you know, the Nazis' main rivals, is found with matches. That's very convenient, isn't it? Hitler is on the scene quite quickly, interesting, and he very quickly blames the communists. So Hitler is able to actually pin this on his main enemy. As a result of this, Hitler persuades President Hindenburg, as you can see, just appeared, to call a state of emergency. So you can see Hindenburg there saying, okay, it's an emergency. And he calls Article 48 up, which is, if you remember from your revision of the Weimar government, Article 48 is that thing that allows the president to pass emergency laws without going through the Reichstag. And he passes an emergency law called Law for the Protection of State and People. And this law essentially allows Hitler to arrest and ban communist leaders, meetings, members, because he's persuaded Hindenburg that because of this boy, as you see in front of you, Marius van der Lubbe, that, you know, essentially the whole of Germany is in danger if the communists stay around. And obviously this is conveniently 1 week before the general election was due to take place. So guess what? The communists won't be allowed to be voted for in the general election. This is very convenient because really that was the Nazis' main rivals, and without those communist seats, the Nazis got a pretty good chance of getting a majority. Poor Marius van der Lubbe was actually beheaded in 1934, so he didn't have a nice end. He also confessed to the Reichstag fire, however this was done under torture. Now, the next one, and you can see on the right, it's changed now to general. So this is the general, stands for the general election. So this is the general election that was always going to happen. And it's essentially a chance for Hitler to gain more control legally. Because if he manages to win the general election and get a majority, okay, in the whole Reichstag, as Chancellor, he can just put in front of them any law and they'll pass it because his own party will vote for it. Perfect. So the general election happens in March. So this is only about a week, probably 6 days after the Reichstag fire. The Communist Party had been banned due to the Reichstag fire, so all the votes do not get counted for the Communist Party. In addition, the SA, which are Hitler's bully boys, stood outside and monitored the voting, making sure that wherever people were voting in the country, that people were voting for the Nazis. This meant the Nazi Party gained more seats than ever, and that's 288. So all the stuff that's in red, by the way, just remember, is stuff that's very useful to get yourself a C grade and above. So try and remember these key facts. The Communist Party votes have been banned, the SA monitor the voting, which obviously means that they basically bully people, and 288 seats is the greatest amount of seats the Nazi Party have had. Now, is this a majority? Not quite, but they combine with the Nationalist Party, or the DMVP, to form a coalition. So now they've got as good as a majority. A coalition government is when two parties come together to create a majority, and they are making a pact with each other that they will always agree with the policies that go through the Reichstag. So they're always going to pass laws together. And if you look again at the picture you saw on the previous slide, this is a summary of all of the votes from the election. And you can see that you've got the NSDAP, which is the other word for the Nazi Party. They've got 43.91%. And it wasn't just a majority. It needed to be 50% or 51% really to be a majority. Okay, because it's under half currently. So you can see why they went with the DMVP, because the DMVP had 7.97% votes. The DMVP had a lot of similarities with their beliefs with the Nazi Party. So the two joined together, and if you add up 43.91 and 7.97, it equals, and actually almost goes above it, the crucial 51%. So Hitler's really happy. He's got a majority. Awesome. So the Reichstag fire eliminates the opposition of the Communist Party and leads to a majority in the general election. Which leads on to the next event. So now if you look on the right, we're on to Rig General Election. The E stands for the Enabling Act. This is in beautiful rainbow colours because it is the most important event that secures Hitler's power for him. Without the Enabling Act, Hitler would not be able to do such outrageous things that he then goes on to do in 1934 legally. So as you can see, it says the Enabling Act is a chance to get rid of opponents legally. With the majority in the Reichstag, Hitler can now pass new laws knowing that they would be voted through. So he puts forward the Enabling Act. Now the Enabling Act, crucially, remember this is in red, so this is the important bit, it allowed Hitler to create laws without going through the Reichstag for 4 whole years. So Hitler is essentially like a dictator. He can make laws up, he doesn't have to go through the Reichstag. Ironically, the Enabling Act was passed through the Reichstag, but allows him to never pass a law again through the Reichstag. Very, very clever. It was voted through by 444 votes to 94. So it was very clear that it was voted through easily. There wasn't very much opposition. And all that opposition for you geeks out there, A-star lot, 94 of those 94 votes were the SDP party. Okay, they all were against Hitler. They were the only ones that could see sense. This means Hitler can now pass laws, whatever laws he wants. So we're now on to the L, T and the P of your mnemonic, leads to psycho. The reason why I've bypassed the Nazi bit is because the L, T and the P stands for things that Hitler was able to ban as a result of the Enabling Act. So the banning of local governments, trade unions and political parties. Because the Enabling Act allowed Hitler to ban basically whoever he considered an enemy. This was a great move for Hitler because he's preventing opposition before it even has a chance to get on its feet. So he bans local governments. Hitler knows full well himself that local governments could potentially overthrow the government. He only had to think of his own example, which was the Mnemonic Purge. Obviously that didn't go very well for Hitler and he ended up in prison, but he knew that he was able to take over the Bavarian government, which was a local government, with the view to actually then taking over the main government. So he knew himself from his own workings that local governments were a potential threat, so he got rid of them and reorganised them. He also knew that trade unions were very powerful and they could get too powerful and rebel. Trade unions, remember, they are essentially any kind of working organisation with their representatives who kind of campaign for better pay, better workers. You've probably heard of teacher unions, and they're probably the only reason why you've heard of them is because sometimes they go on strike. Now that is an example of union action which can really stop everything. Going on strike means you stop working and can cause a very powerful message. And he does not want a Germany where this can happen. He does not want the workers to stop and go on strike and make everything inefficient, nor does he want them demanding too much, becoming too powerful, and maybe sort of trying to overthrow the government. And Hitler also eventually felt he could use the Enabling Act to essentially ban all other political parties, so no one else could be voted for. By this stage, this was a bit later on, hence why you've got the psycho bit after the Nazi, because in your mnemonic, the psycho bit, the banning of political parties, happens a little bit later. And the reason why it happens a little bit later is because he's got to the point where he feels he can really get away with it, because let's face it guys, it's pretty obvious. You are banning all your other rivals, no one else is allowed to be voted for. I think everyone by now has realised that Hitler is taking the mickey. But Hitler, through the Enabling Act, has got rid of all of his potential opposition to the party. Now, the Night of the Long Knives was kind of the tidying up act that Hitler did. He's got rid of all external opposition, but he's now paranoid about his own party. He's crucially paranoid about his own party because he's kind of allowed and he's had to delegate really high positions of power to his own henchmen. So he's got Goering, he's got Himmler, and as you can see on the right, he's got Ernst Röhm. Now, Ernst Röhm was in charge of the SA, and Hitler didn't yet have an oath of loyalty from the regular army, and the SA actually outnumbered the regular army, and the SA had a real oath of loyalty to Röhm, more so than Hitler. By this time, the SA numbered over 2 million. This is a huge number. This outnumbers the regular army. This is more than there was in the German army in World War I. And Röhm, that little man on the right, he's got ultimate control of them. He has an army. And Hitler's got in the back of his mind, he knows that essentially those people with the strongest army win. So this is a potential disaster for him. The SA were more loyal to Rome than Hitler. So Hitler's kind of worried about this. Even more worrying is that Rome apparently also planned to combine the regular army with the SA to create this big super army. The regular army weren't very happy about this. And of course Hitler wasn't very happy about this. Goering and Himmler, Hitler's other henchmen, also weren't very happy about this because Rome was acting like he was more powerful than anyone, and so they also made things a little bit worse for Rome and told Hitler that Rome held many socialist views as well. So not only was he trying to take over the army, but he was no better than the communists, and Hitler had got rid of the communists, so this is outrageous. So Hitler is very worried. This whole thing is worrying for Hitler, and it's worrying for the army. And it's crucially worrying for the army because Hitler can then play it into his own hands. He can persuade them that it's important to get rid of the SA so that he can then get the army on his side. So this is Ernest Röhm, and he's too big for his boots. So now we move on to the Night of the Long Knives itself. Now this is a really useful event to know the details of, because not only is it a very strange story showing a man who's totally gone beyond paranoia, but also it's actually a really useful 6-mark or 8-mark question. So it's a good job to learn this one. Now at this point I'd like you to pause and reflect on the beautiful picture that you can see in front of you. Here you've got a lovely hummingbird in really high definition going towards a flower, going to extract the nectar. So not only is this there for you to enjoy and feel relaxed as you're doing your revision, but very conveniently it is also the name, the code name of the Night of the Long Knives, Operation Hummingbird. Now this is a very clever name because hummingbird suggests a very small, very quiet bird that nips in, grabs what it needs and gets out of there silently without almost anyone noticing within a blink of an eye. This is precisely what the Night of the Long Knives was like. It was a short, sharp purge of Hitler's closest men. Hitler wanted to get this done very quickly and almost without anyone realising, so that he could move swiftly on. So it all happened on the 29th of June 1934, in the wee hours of the morning. So again, that kind of element of surprise. It was about 4 a.m. Hitler sent his SS, so his bodyguard, to arrest Röhm and his men. So remember, Röhm's men are the SA. So it's SS arresting the SA. The black shirts arresting the brown shirts. The bodyguard arresting the thugs. Think of it as many ways as you want. Don't get those mixed up. The SA are the ones that get killed. The SS are the ones that do the killing. Anyway, over the next 24 hours, over 200 SA leaders are arrested and many shot. This is an incredible number of people that are purged. Now, purge is a word that means got rid of very quickly and kind of dramatically and fiercely. And the arrests are not dramatic enough. Many of them were shot, including Röhm. Now, Röhm, the leader of the SA, Hitler actually wanted to give him some respect. So he was actually given a pistol to commit suicide with, because Hitler wanted him to have the dignity of the choice of his own death, to own his own death. But actually Röhm was very upset and he refused to do so. So unfortunately for Röhm, he was shot. Von Schleicher, who was former Chancellor in 1932, he was one of the 3 Chancellors before Hitler became Chancellor, he was also among those who were shot. And there's other names as well, but these are some of the crucial ones. Now the cartoon that's just appeared on the right is David Lowe's cartoon in 1934 of the Night of the Long Knives. You can see you've got Hitler in the middle with the smoking gun, who looks really like, an animal just killing. You've got on his right the god of war, Thor. Now the god of war, or Thor, is actually Hitler's right-hand man, Goering. Goering would later be actually in charge of the army in World War II. He was also in charge of the Luftwaffe, the aeroplanes, but he was also one of the 2 men that set up the concentration camps. That the other person was Himmler. So the god of war, the evil kind of sidekick to Hitler, is stood next to him, ready. He's also helped carry out the shootings. The SA are stood with their hands up. They're not doing the 1-arm raised salute. They are now doing the 2-arm salute because they are showing surrender. And actually that's kind of what the caption of the cartoon says, that they're no longer doing the 1-arm salute because they were never quite loyal enough to Hitler. And actually they're more easily with putting their 2 hands up so Hitler can just get rid of them. They find that much easier to be scared. You can see some feet of some people who've already been killed. That's some of the SA who've already been killed. And then quite comically, behind Hitler, as his sort of poodle, little lap dog, you've got Goebbels. And Goebbels was the Minister of Propaganda. So he's always there lurking in the background. So, the 3 of them look like a really bizarre rabble, going towards killing these men who have basically put their hands up to say, don't kill us. There's also a bit of a conspiracy about whether or not the Night of the Long Knives was a totally anti-gay, homophobic move by Hitler as well, because it was widely known that Rom was quite gay, and a lot of the SA officers were gay too. This was quite glossed over by Hitler because he wanted it to be seen as something official. So, the Night of the Long Knives had some really good consequences for Hitler. The regular army now swore a full oath to Hitler. This is so crucial for Hitler. He now has the full confidence that the army will do what he says. Remember, the people with the most army win, with the strongest army. Hitler was very cleverly able to justify the Night of the Long Knives. He's just gone over 24 hours and gone around and basically killed a load of people. But he can claim it was legal under the Enabling Act once again, this law that allows him to do whatever he wants. And very crucially, he's able to claim that it was all for the protection of the people. No, I did it for you, is what he's trying to say. And people fell for it. People really fell for it. Even the ailing Hindenburg, the old 84-year-old Hindenburg, he expressed his profoundly felt gratitude in a telegram. He sent the telegram was like a personal message to Hitler. He was so convinced by it, he really felt he had to tell Hitler how grateful he was. So you can imagine him saying, "Well, my old age must be really getting the better of me, but I'm starting to really like this Hitler. He is so caring." I'm sorry about the accent, I'm a little bit tired. But Hitler only had one level now left before he had ultimate power, and that was essentially Hindenburg. Come on, he's like a pussycat. He's thanking Hitler for going and killing loads of his men. He's not going to be any problem. So, in summary, all of those things that we've been through, all of those events, the rigged German election leads to Nazi Psycho Fuhrer, all of those events, they kind of add up. They make a story. Think of it all like a story. It all fits together. Hitler, you can imagine that he's sat there. You can see him in that picture. He's relaxing. He's got a piece of paper in his hand. I'm imagining that maybe he's making a checklist to get into power. And if you think about it, everything he's done is very clever. It's very logical. It all fits together. So this is how his checklist might go. So my power checklist by Adolf Hitler. Number 1, I'd need to take full advantage of opportunities. Has he done that? Yes. The Reichstag fire was a very good opportunity. Check. Number 2, take full advantage of Hindenburg's increasing misjudgments. Has he done this? Yep. Hindenburg is pretty much losing the plot. He's quite old. He has allowed Hitler and been persuaded by Hitler to ban the communists. He has also thanked Hitler for killing his own men. Check. Number 3, eliminate all of my opponents. Has he done this? Yes, he's got rid of his main rivals, the communists, through the Reichstag fire. He's also managed to get rid of the local governments, the trade unions, the political parties, just by passing that Enabling Act. So I think we can say, check. Number 4, make sure I don't forget to crush those in my own party. Well, the Night of the Long Knives cared about that, didn't it? That all kind of cared for all of that. Check. And number 5, Crucially, do all of this legally, because Hitler knows from the Munich Purge the mistake. It's no good being in prison, you can't do anything. He can always claim that it was done under the law. Has it been done legally? Yeah, the Enabling Act has basically allowed him to do whatever. Check. So as you can see, Hitler has been able to get himself into ultimate power very cleverly through those events. And so think of those events together. Like one thing leads to the other, he gets rid of this, he gets rid of this, to the point where he's just basically got full power. So congratulations, you have finally reached exam practice. You've put up with me for 25 minutes explaining to you in detail all those events. But that is really good, because you've gone through 25 minutes of revision and you've gone through probably the most important section of the whole exam, because this topic is such a favourite of the examiners, and you'll see in a minute just how many examples, questions we've got. You will also notice that they're all worth quite a lot of marks. They're usually 8 marks or above on this topic. So here's an example. Explain the effects of the Reichstag fire in 1933. It's 8 marks. It wants you to explain it and link reasons together. Easy peasy. Reichstag fire is the first event in the whole kind of chain of events, 1933. So you're going to go through how the Reichstag fire leads to the banning of communism in the general election, and how the general election gets the Nazi majority so they can pass the Enabling Act, and how the Enabling Act then leads to the banning of opposition, including local governments, trade unions, political parties, the nicer long knives, so that Hitler can become Fuhrer. Explain how Hitler used the Reichstag fire to weaken opposition to the Nazis. It's essentially the same question as before, worded slightly differently. If it's an explain question, it's about the Reichstag fire, you can be pretty confident that going through the rigged German election thing and showing how they all link is the right thing to do. Explain the effects of the Enabling Act in Germany. Well, this is the Enabling Act, so we start at the mnemonic part where it's the election. So election leads to Nazi Psychoführer, so you go through the Enabling Act, how it allows Hitler to ban legally the local governments, the political parties, the trade unions, the nice long knives, makes him Fuhrer. Explain the effects of the nice long knives. Well, we're slightly further along the chain of events here. It's an 8-mark question again, so it still wants you to explain, it still wants you to link things together. So essentially you need to think about the fact that, the nice long knives is one of the last tidying up actions that Hitler does. No one else in his way after this. All opposition has been crushed. The army swore an oath of loyalty to Hitler, so he's got, complete control of the army. Hindenburg even thanks Hitler, and all he's got to do is wait for Hindenburg to die, and then he can become Fuhrer. Notice, you do not need to talk about the events, the nice long knives in this. It is about the effects. Always, folks, underline the key instruction word. Explain effects. Okay, so you know what you're talking about in your answer. Here is another example. Again, it's an 8-mark question. Explain why Hitler acted against the essay on the Knights of Long Knives. Now, if you looked at that exam question, you might be a little bit put off, because you'd be like, the Sturmabteilung, what on earth is that? And you'll see in brackets essay, and you might get yourself confused. You'll start thinking, oh God, have I got to talk about the essay? No, it's the Knight of the Long Knives. It's why Hitler acted against the essay. So it's a why question. It's about why did Hitler carry out the Knight of the Long Knives. So you want the reasons for, the causes of the Knight of the Long Knives. So go back and think about, what it was. Rome getting too big for his boots. Remember the huge size of the essay. It's now numbers 2 million. The fact that Hitler wanted support of the army, the fact that Rom was also maybe being a bit too socialist, a bit too communist, and the possibility also that maybe Hitler was very homophobic and wanted to get rid of any gay elements in his troops. And explain how Hitler was able to overcome opposition to his government in the years 1933 to 1934. Now this question and this question that's just appeared on the screen, again, they are both 8-mark questions. And the key thing is here, it doesn't really matter what else it says in the question. You can see clearly that there are those crucial dates I mentioned right at the very beginning, 1933 to 1934. You've got an instruction word, explain how, explain, right? So explain those events from 1933 to 1934. That's what they want you to do. You just go through the mnemonic and you explain how all of these things slowly gets rid of opposition and slowly consolidates his power, establishes his authority. They're all words, they're phrases that just mean the same thing. Go through all the events, link them together, just as we've done. And finally, we're on to the big question, the 16 marker. This is a classic topic to come up as a 16 marker because you've got so many events that link in with each other. And if you look at the red writing below, even before you look at the question, the key skills that are being tested here is your ability to link, is your ability to argue a point, and is your ability to prioritise, which means to show how important events are in relation to each other. Which one is the most important event or reason, and why is it more important than any of the other ones? So if you look at the question itself, it is essentially asking, was this reason the main reason why Hitler was able to establish a dictatorship in Germany by 1934? So it's really asking you, out of your mnemonic, out of rigged German election leads to Nazi psycho Fuhrer, out of all of those events that happened between 1933 and 1934, which one is the most important event that enables Hitler to become ultimate controller, the Fuhrer, the dictator? So if that's the question, it's a classic question, and the Reichstag fire happens to be the one that they're asking about, but they're asking if that one's the main reason. You might find the question asks you if the Enabling Act was the main reason, or the general election results were, or anything. It could be any of them interchanged. You have to say whether you agree with the one that they chose. Now, this question is really about your skill of explaining, linking, arguing, prioritising. So you need an introduction, you need some main paragraphs, and you need a conclusion. You can see that the content is there for you in the sense that you've got 5 things to talk about already. You've got the 4 bullet points which have been provided, and you've also got the point that's in the question that it's provided for you too. So you've just simply got to do one thing before you even start, which is decide which out of those 5 things is the most important reason for whatever your question's on. So in this case it's for why Hitler was able to establish a dictatorship. Well, ultimately, folks, it's the Enabling Act. It's a really good one to choose as your number 1 reason because the examiner will expect it and it's very easy to justify. If you look at the red writing below, the Enabling Act equals the most important reason because if you think about it, without it, nothing else would be able to have happened. So without it, Hitler could not have removed his opposition legally so that he could consolidate his power. Because if you think about what follows the Enabling Act, he removes the opposition of the local governments, he removes opposition of the trade unions, he removes opposition of the Knight of the Long Knives, i.e. the SA, he removes opposition of the other political parties. He gets rid of all of the events that could potentially overthrow his power. So he gets rid of all of them. So this crucial law, the Enabling Act, allows him to do this legally. So no one can stop him. So really try and argue that. And a really good way, which it says there, of trying to show how important something is using that phrase, without it. What would it be like without it? And if you realise that without this event or this reason, actually it wouldn't have been quite as it was, then it must be pretty important. So the Enabling Act is the most important reason why Hitler was able to establish a dictatorship in Germany by 1934. Gosh, we've gone 32, almost 33 minutes of revision just on this topic. You have done incredibly well. My advice to you would be go and try an exam question. Maybe go through the mnemonic, rigged German election leads to Nazi psycho Fuhrer, repeat it over and over again, learn what each one stands for, repeat that over and over again, and then try and link each event to each other, because it's the linking of these events to each other which will get you your points in your 8-mark question or your 16-mark question. So keep saying it, talk to somebody else about it, drive your friends mad, drive your parents mad, send a text with it in to your friends. We could have these mnemonics being sent all across the phone networks just to remind each other randomly of what the mnemonic is. You could drive your neighbours mad, you could drive your dogs mad, your cats mad, your horses mad. You could drive yourself mad too. I would say, more importantly, let yourself have a go and reward yourself with a really nice just piece of cake or a cup of tea or a hot chocolate or just something nice because you deserve it. Well done. Bye.